So what's the next topic?
I don't know. I was kind of thinking about going over my business bill of rights and kind of talking about that. I thought that would be kind of a fun little one to do. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember. We went over it that one day.
Yeah. Because I think that would be.
Is that one you want Carlos here for or no?
Not necessarily, because I don't know. I don't know if Carlos would really add much to the topic, just because I think he'd just be kind of like, oh, maybe, yeah, sure, that sounds great.
Yeah, I'm a little bored. Yeah, no worries.
So, well, okay, so let's. I'm gonna read over this. Well, I'll do each one, and then we can talk about them as we go.
Yeah, that's easiest.
So, well, let me read through all of them first, and then we'll go back through and do each one individually. So that way we can get the whole list out at the beginning.
Yeah. How many total do you have?
10.
10? Okay, that's fine.
Cool. Okay, so this is the Business Bill of Rights that I wrote a while back. Kyle and I have discussed this before, but we're going to go over it again because I'd like all of you to see this, and I would also like your guys' opinions if anybody actually ever watches these videos and you guys want to comment. So this is going to be about a while back. I was watching some stuff and I was reading through some things, and sometimes I feel inspiration to write, and a lot of the time I feel a very strong urge to do that, and normally I can't get rid of that urge until I actually do things and I write it down. So that's what happened with this. One day I was watching some stuff. I don't remember exactly what I was watching, but it was just my normal news things, and I had divine inspiration hit me, and I started writing, and I started writing out what I now call a business bill of rights. I just wrote until I stopped writing, and it turned out they ended up being 10 of them. That wasn't intentional at all. It was just where the inspiration stopped. So we're going to go through them. I actually wrote these in reverse, so I'm going to read them in what I think is more of a forward section, but really they're just 10 general ideas that I think would be very well applied if they were actually considered a business bill of rights to help curb the government, to stop them from interfering in government in many of the ways that they did. A lot of this came from all the businesses getting shut down due to coronavirus, even though there really wasn't any way to prove that those kind of things happened. The bars are a prime example. No, at least not in my opinion. I don't think there's any real scientific solid evidence to prove that bars were spreading coronavirus any more than restaurants. I think that's just silly. So the fact that the government was coming through and saying that these industries were they were a harm to the public health and wanted to shut them down based on their opinions, I think is completely wrong without having any scientific data to back it up. They completely ruined a lot of people's lives, and some businesses that are never coming back, just because they did it on an assumption, not based on any factual or scientific evidence. So I think that's part of a lot of what inspired me to write these. All right, so we're going to go through the begin. I'm going to start at the beginning of the book and go towards the back, even though I actually wrote these the other way. So, number 1, no business shall be regulated by the government without proving in a courtroom with a jury of their peers to be a credible threat to public safety. Okay, I kind of wrote these in an edited way, so this isn't like a final draft, so I might skip over some words here and there. No government shall pass a law respecting one business over another. No government official shall benefit in any financial manner from legislation passed other than that it does benefit individual citizens in an equal manner. So no government official shall benefit in any financial manner from legislation passed other than in the way that it does benefit individual citizens in an equal manner. Any legislature, elected official, or other government entity that has a personal or financial stake in legislation shall recuse themselves from voting or ruling on said matters. So including like judges and stuff like that. All disagreements between government and business shall be settled in a courtroom by a jury of peers. Yep. All right. The right to own, operate, and run a business shall not be infringed. Oh, maybe I should have read these the other way. The right to refuse service shall solely lay with the owner of the business. No excessive licensing or fees shall be required to operate a business. No tax shall be levied unequally on one business and not another. all business entities shall be considered as individual persons in regards to all constitutional rights. I think I got through most of that. We'll go back through and do all this. We're going to talk about these one by one. So I think I might have skipped a few. So let's go through this here. All right, so let's just start the way I wrote them. The Business Bill of Rights. The right to own, operate, and run a business shall not be infringed. Yeah, so
Yeah, basically you can.
yeah, it's the second. I'm quoting the Second Amendment is basically what it comes down to. The right to own, operate, and run a business shall not be infringed. So
Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory, honestly.
right, yeah,
Yeah,
that
I don't-
one's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, I doubt that one needs any.
Yeah, any major discussion or topic on that one?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on to this one. The right to refuse service shall lie solely with the business. Yeah, so and I wrote that one. I reworded that one a little bit because initially it was with the business owner, and just because I didn't want people to impose. But that one basically just makes it to where anybody, I don't want to, and that one I think already kind of happens right now anyway. I think a lot of that with the right to refuse service, I think that's something that's already pretty common. But the right to refuse service to anyone making it a constitutional right, I think would eliminate a lot of the issues with fraudulent lawsuits. Prime example, I mean, I know this has already been rehashed and already been worked through the courts, but the gay marriage couple with the Bakers, one of those situations where if this was enshrined as an actual constitutional right, then that situation would have never come up. It would have been simply be like, look, we refused your service, and you have no, because that's our constitutional right to refuse you service at our business. Then you no longer you have no grounds to sue me on because it's my constitutionally guaranteed right.
I think we should probably talk about that just a second.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Because I mean, honestly,
Because
I don't agree with what they did. I mean, I can't agree with refusing service based on that, but I feel as though it should be their right. Because I mean, the market works in a way nowadays that whenever you do something like that, you kill your business.
Right.
So I mean, you don't have to be sued. I mean, there was no reason to sue them. Their business was done.
Right.
They're not getting any more business. If they do, it's very minuscule. They probably won't be able to make a living. They'll probably have to start a new business. And that is enough punishment.
Clearly, you didn't follow up on what happened with that
No,
situation.
I don't know what happened on the situation. You'll probably have
But
to
you
enlighten
make
me.
a good point about free market forces.
Let
okay.
the market decide. Not you don't need to sue someone on their personal beliefs because I don't think I should have any.
Yeah, because theirs was religious grounds.
Yeah, and that's fine, but I wouldn't shop there because of that. And that's how things should work. You shouldn't. And if they have enough clientele that've been going to them for years and years and years and years and go to their church and so on, fine. They should have gone to a different baker.
Right.
You know, they shouldn't be able to sue someone for something so ridiculous. Like that's you're saying that I can be sued for pretty much anything at this point. Yeah, you know, just because of the way you interpret it, and that's dangerous. That's so dangerous to walk down that road.
And I think some people are going to bring up the argument, well, that just gives businesses the ability to discriminate against whoever they want. Yes, it does. And in a world prior to social media and the internet and the freedom of information we have nowadays, people would be like, oh, well, that just means they're going to get to discriminate against black people or they're going to discriminate against Mexicans or whatever. Well, the problem with that is nowadays the free market's going to handle a situation like that. Mm-hmm. Because the free market's going to go, because as soon as people find out about that, it's going to blow up on social media. And everybody that finds out about that is going to know what kind of people own that place, what kind of people run that kind of place, and they're no longer going to do business with them because we as a society, more or less, have agreed that discriminating against a person based on their race, color, creed, whatever, is not right.
Yeah.
It's so now instead of the government getting involved in discrimination, you let the free market decide as to whether or not the individuals want to support that person. And if people want to continue to support that person, even though you might not agree with it, it's not your right to shut down that person's business just because you don't agree with their morality.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have this is not going to be able to be used for widespread discrimination simply because of the fact that information nowadays is so much more readily available, and us as free market individuals are going to decide not to patronize that person because they're a racist asshole.
I hate to, but we have apps that give reviews. You can look up what kind of business you're going to nowadays, bottom to top, and they'll tell you the worst experiences that you can possibly have in that establishment. And I hate to say it, but if you're homosexual or what you're supposed to call people, gay offensive now?
No, it's still in the LGBTQ plus whatever.
Oh yeah, it is.
Gay's still in there.
So, say you're gay, and you look up the business and it's the cake place, and it's like, oh, they discriminated against a gay couple. Why would I fucking go there? And it just, I feel like it's better that way. And then maybe you decide to go there anyways, and they do it again, and you're like, okay, this has happened twice, and then you start writing forms of reviews or so on, and that place won't be frequented anymore. Or just then a normal couple will just be like, well, if they don't agree with something, they're not going to make my cake. I can't chance that. And then it's like, hey, that place is going out of business. And whenever you start denying service, it's a dangerous game in the first place. So you should be doing it for genuine reasons. So if you're doing it for frivolous reasons, you're putting your business you're going out of business one way or the other. Right. Let the market do it.
Yeah.
Don't force me to, because if somebody is X thing and it is disrupting my business because they are making, so any person, whatever their sexuality, but if they're harassing my other customers sexually, I have every right to kick them out of my business, and I will put that on every social media that I had to kick this person out because he was sexually harassing my other customers. That was terrible, but I had the right to do that.
Yeah. You had the right to kick them out.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they can argue that I was...
You're discriminating against them just because they're gay.
Yeah, let the market decide that.
Absolutely.
And
that and it's like, it's one of those things. We live in an information age like never before, at least not in remembered history. And it's one of those things where nowadays the argument that, well, that could be institutional, you could make it to where that's, if you allow this, then, entire sections are just going to be able to do that. Well, the thing about it is now most people, we aren't who we were 50 years ago.
No.
And technology has changed, and information gets spread so much faster. So if you found out a place was discriminating based on whatever and you didn't agree with it, well, now you're more than willing to be free to open that up and spread that information out and talk to anybody about that and let everybody know, hey, these guys are assholes. They won't serve Mexicans. Well, fuck, we ain't going there then. We're going to take our business to the restaurant next door to them. And then people will be like, well, what if that's the only restaurant in town? Well, if you've got your business bill of rights and your right to operate a business is not infringed in any way, shape, or form, there's nothing to stop you from opening up that business right down the street.
You can open it up right next door and literally spit in their face.
Exactly. And so there's no that kind of stuff. We've moved beyond that being a worry just because we live in a world where there's so much more information out there now.
Mm-hmm. So. Which is, let the people decide.
Exactly.
It's not a government's place. We are strong enough as a country to say, hey, we don't tolerate you harassing homosexuals because they like, a dude likes men or a girl likes girls. I'm sorry. I hate to say it, but we live in a country where they'll be fucked up. There will be a person who will be offended and fuck that person up, and it's like, hey, cool, awesome, I like that.
Yeah. It's not.
Obviously, I'm not condoning violence, but
right.
Unless it is actual sexual harassment or something, then you probably should. Then I'm completely condoning violence.
It's one of those things. This isn't the 50s and 60s anymore.
No.
The majority of people do not carry those kind of ideals where you had to force it the opposite direction. Yeah. Those kind of people, are they still out there? Of course. You're always going to have assholes in the world. The thing about it is, the assholes aren't the predominant force in the world anymore.
No, I don't know any.
The discriminating assholes aren't the predominant force.
When's the last time you met somebody who genuinely hated gay people?
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up. My father was a little bit on that side. He's not like that anymore. He got with the times.
He's evolved and changed.
Yeah, and we as a country have evolved and changed.
Yeah,
like our 50, 60-year-old people. I mean, that were alive whenever I hate to say, but that was commonplace. They don't care. They want to just live their lives and be happy and go out to eat with their wife, and they don't. A gay dude sit next to him BSing, they'll BS with them.
Yep.
I haven't seen genuine. I hate to say it, but it's been a long time since I've seen genuine racism and genuine homophobia or anything like that.
Like legitimate institutionalized
systems. It's not as much of it. And I get people are going to say, oh, but this time and this time. It's like, yeah, those are terrible people.
Yeah, there's always
Congratulations, you saw the 1% of horrible human beings, because we're all horrible human beings and we're all great human beings,
and
you're
always going to find a one-off story to justify any of that kind of stuff. Yeah. You'll always be able to find a one-off story about any of that justification, but until you can prove to me that it is systematically an issue in a very large portion that affects a lot of people, it's bullshit. Your argument's mute.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, I don't know anyone who would tolerate it. No. But I think we've harped on that one enough. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so let's see here. All right, so we did right to refuse service. Okay, no excessive licensing or fees shall be required to operate a business.
This is actually one I have a whole lot of fucking opinion on.
So let me give a little rundown on my ideas behind that one since we wrote it. So my idea behind that one was there's a lot of groups out there specifically that will use licensing as a way to prevent other people from getting involved in a particular institution. One of the examples that I was thinking of probably at the time...
I actually have a story after you're done. Remind me.
Well, at the time, one of the things I was thinking about at the time was the no excessive licensing or fees. Was initially it was going to be no licensing or fees. Period was going to be the actual thing. And then I think we actually talked about this, I think as part of the reason why I put no excessive licensing or fees shall be required, because I think there's certain situations. I think anybody should be able to open up any kind of business they want to and operate it the way they want. But when you start getting into situations where you have like a $500 or liquor stores, bars are a prime example. Okay, bars are exactly what I was. Now I remember, bars are exactly why I brought this one up. Okay, I looked at it. In order for me to open up a bar that serves beer and liquor in the state of Texas, okay, at minimum is like $2,500. Okay,
I have a story about this.
Yeah, $2,500. So that was one of my reasonings as to why the excessive licensing fees. I understand the government needs some of those fees to help operate certain sections. And I also understand that helps pay for regulations on those industries. I understand the reasoning behind the licensing fees. I have an issue with excessive licensing fees. There's no reason it should cost me $2,500 out the door just in order to get a license to open a place.
Because we already have syntax.
Yeah, there's already syntax on stuff like that, so you're already getting money from all that kind of stuff. There's no reason it should cost me $2,500 just for the license to open a bar. I'm okay with minimal processing fees as far as like maybe like $50 or $100 or something like that. Figure out some way to cap it at a reasonable rate and call it a day. So that's why I put excessive in there, because excessive gives you the ability to argue that in a courtroom. So you still have the ability to have some kind of fee and have some kind of licensing requirements, but you don't have it to where it's excessive. You don't have to go through a lot of crazy regulation on stuff like that.
So speaking of fees and everything, I was working at an axe house, and this is just to give an example of this. Good. So, yeah. So I was working at an axe house, and they were wanting to start selling beer and wine, right? And I helped put the place together. It was a fun project. It was a buddy of mine. You know, I did all the work for free. It was a good time, really good time. And we were doing all this stuff, and one of his buddies, I'm not going to say his name. He has a ridiculous name, but he was like, "Dude, we got to get some beer and wine in here." And he's like, "Dude, I want to get it done, but it's fucking expensive." Well, the original cost was like give or take $2,000 for just getting your alcohol license to sell beer and wine. Your beer and I think it's beer and wine license or something like that, something along those lines, right?
I think the wine falls into the wine and liquor.
Yeah. So what it boiled down to is, whenever he went to go and get it processed, he was like, he had the money and everything, and he went down, and they were like, "Okay, cool," and they were like, "You're like X miles away from a school, right?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." And to put it in perspective, the school is about 3 or 4 miles away. It's really solid. Like, it's barely within walking distance. It's it's Weber to King, okay, which is really far. It's like 2 miles, 3 miles. It's pretty far away. So because the school was so close, they had to add an extra $4,000 on top of it. It ended up being like closer to $5,000 to get their alcohol license there, maybe more. Yeah, it never happened because it was so fucking expensive. We were about to. The second it got approved, we were gonna rip walls and start building a bar. It was gonna be badass. No, it screwed the business because it was a Viking theme, so they were gonna have like blood, like the fucking
blood wine and
meads, all this stuff. It was going to be, you'd go in and it would be a full experience, and it was a family friendly experience. Like they would have a minor food and like snacks and stuff for the kids.
Because even Chuck E. Cheese has beer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like it was this cool experience. The kids could, like the adults could have like the horn. Yeah. You could buy a horn there. Like that was the plan. We already had a guy who was going to make us horns to start selling there. Yeah. It was awesome.
And how's that axe business doing since they weren't able to get that?
Not phenomenal. It could be doing a lot better. It could be doing a lot better. Good guys. They're frequented by a good set of people. It's just not. It's gone under a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that falls into the excessive licensing parts.
It hurts businesses, and that he's a good guy and he's trying to make it in the world and do what he loves, and it's like, dude, y'all are fucking ripping it away. Yeah. It's overkill, and it happens to more businesses than people think. A lot of people haven't opened up a business, so they don't know. They don't realize how easy it is to go under. And it's like, that can put you under.
Yeah.
If he decided to do that and, he was like riding on it and then the COVID stuff hit and business is gone.
Nope.
He could have screwed himself completely by taking a leap of faith to try to make his business work. But, yeah.
It was just way too much money.
Way too much. So, yeah. That was my story on the Axe House.
Yeah. So that's that one. So that's why, I think the story Kyle just brought up is a prime example of exactly why something like this needs to happen, because that's an excessive licensing and fee situation right there. You're making him have to get an extra license just because he's within a certain distance to a school. Yeah. That's ridiculous. That's old morality, religious stuff that's moving in on a society that shouldn't be an issue. Okay, little kids aren't going to be running down to the Axe House in order to grab a beer. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things. If that was the worry about it, then that whole concept should just absolutely ridiculous. I think a lot of the arguments behind that were like, oh, well, that just means DUI people are going to be even closer to a school. Well, that's a stupid argument. It doesn't matter. Well, I can get drunk at my house and drive through a school zone. It doesn't matter if the bar happens to be closer.
And
I don't think there's been any study to ever show that the closeness to a particular venue means more DUIs, unless the cops are just sitting outside that venue waiting for everybody to leave so they can pull them over.
Well, kids don't drink beer anymore, as far as I can tell. They drink freaking White Claws, and beer doesn't taste good, guys. It doesn't.
Yeah, don't.
It's an acquired taste.
If you're underage, don't drink it. It just tastes gross. Anyway.
Yeah. So. I'm sorry. They don't smoke freaking cigars and cigarettes and shit. It's like, a kid's not going to want to smoke a freaking cigar.
No.
On to the next one.
All right, on to the next one. So we did excessive licensing and fees. No tax shall be levied unequally on one business and not another. Okay, I think this one's pretty obvious. I don't think this one needs a whole lot of explaining. But there was the reason why I brought this up and the reason why I wrote this down was there's an old saying that I used to always hear, is that you can single-handedly destroy a man's entire world without leaving a mark strictly with the tax code. And that happens all the time in the United States with these tax breaks and with all of these industry kind of things going. They will go ahead and they'll give, tax breaks to one company to encourage them to move in, but not tax breaks to another company to cause them to move in. And that's my biggest issue with that is that's government picking winners and losers. And that never works. You don't want that I don't want that in a free market system. I don't think anyone wants that in a free market system. I don't think it works out very well, because then you have the government deciding who gets to do well and who doesn't. And I think that's an issue no matter what it is. The free market needs to decide. So
that just sounds like discrimination to me as far as I'm concerned.
It is. It's absolute discrimination. It's just discrimination in a new form. Now they're discriminating against one business by giving the other business tax breaks, and they specify this in law. I actually watched this happen when I was in high school. I went and job shadowed with one of my representatives because I thought about being a politician when I was in high school. But he was one of the, boy, that idea. I'm glad I didn't do that. Anyway, But yeah, that was what there was a joke that was made in the congressional hearings while the Congress was in at the State of Representatives in Missouri. One of the guys made jokes about, "Hey, are there any more tax breaks for X company?" I don't even remember what company. I think it was Sprint or something like that at the time. Sprint to get them any more tax breaks because they were trying to encourage them to move to Missouri. But the problem is they were specifying a particular company. So they were literally only going after one very specific company and only offering those discount rates to that single company and not to any other company. That's my issue, because now you have the government picking winners and losers and deciding which businesses succeed and which ones don't. And I have a huge issue with that, because now the playing field is no longer level. And you might be okay with it when your guy's in power, but your guy, when he's in power, is going to set that precedent, and your guy will not always be in power. So when that turns around and now it's on the other guy, now it's on the other foot, and the other guy's using that power, well, you're going to scream and holler because you don't like the way he's using that power. They shouldn't have that power to begin with.
Well, that's why I'm saying the only people we should give tax breaks to are Whataburger going into a state where they have only In-N-Out, so we can burn out In-N-Out and get them out of the world.
That, once again, would be government interfering in a free market system.
We need In-N-Out to go away.
No, we don't need In-N-Out to go away. You should be able to freely choose whether you want to agree that Whataburger is the best burger restaurant on the face of the planet, or you want to agree to be wrong. I'm perfectly okay with you agreeing to be wrong. Okay? But it still should be your choice to be wrong.
Joking. No actual.
Do you have any thoughts on that, though?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory, honestly. That one is super self-explanatory because it's just discrimination. You're talking discrimination in a financial form, which is just as bad as discrimination anywhere else. You don't discriminate against people for any sort of business they're running. Like, minus, obviously, maybe don't do, like, sex trade or something like that. But that's fine.
Illegal stuff. Yeah, illegal things.
If it's illegal, maybe we should make it really hard.
Yeah.
Maybe make some laws. I've never thought about it before, but make it illegal to do some things. Like, I don't know, rape or murder. I'm joking.
Let's not use the tax code to discourage morality. Okay.
All right. So simple enough.
Yeah, I think so on that one too. And that, as far as I'm concerned, that's sin tax and everything else. I don't think any of those should apply. I think all of that is unfairly targeting one industry over another. I don't agree with any of that kind of stuff.
If we do have sin tax, I mean, just keep it on alcohol to keep the TABC running, or. Like, I understand if they made it for that, but that's not the reason it's around, and I don't like the reason it's around. Don't call it sin tax, for one.
Yeah.
Also...
and that could be part of licensing fees.
Yeah, I mean, that exactly.
To help run the TABC.
Yeah, make it reasonable. Right. But yeah, don't discriminate against one company or the other. Like, having tax breaks for, like, a church or something like that's it's not necessary. Like, I don't see a reason for it.
Well, and churches fall into nonprofits, though.
Obviously,
and a lot
that's a whole different.
Nonprofits are complete.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about getting rid of nonprofits.
No,
I'm talking about traditional, regular businesses.
Yes, if you sold like crosses, I don't know. Yeah, like I just can't agree with discriminating against one business over the other. And granted, churches aren't really a business.
No,
they definitely shouldn't be.
No, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be treated as a business. But yeah, that's a topic for a whole nother day.
Yeah.
As far as churches acting like,
that's creepy.
Yeah, a whole nother thing with it. Okay, all right. So no taxes levied. Okay, all businesses shall.
Oh, homeless dog.
Yeah, all businesses shall be considered as individual persons in regards to all constitutional rights. Now, I think this one more or less already applies. My understanding is that corporations. And I could be wrong, and anybody that ever sees this, by all means, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is more or less corporations are treated as individuals when it comes to constitutional Bill of Rights. Yeah. I think it would just be a good idea to put this into the Constitutional Business Bill of Rights, just so that way it is secured into the Constitution, as stating that beyond a shadow of a doubt, so that way no one can ever try to argue that in the future and make it go away. I think businesses should be treated as individuals when it comes to, any kind of legal proceedings, any of the kind of stuff that comes from our constitutional business bill, or from our traditional Bill of Rights, our first 10 amendments, or any of the rest of the amendments in the Constitution. And I think that's something that basically already happens, but I would just like it to be in there to reiterate that.
Yeah, definitely.
Make it permanent, basically.
Very simple. Yeah, very, very self-explanatory.
Yeah. All right. And so our next one is, all right, there we go. That's all the business rights. So on to the next page. No government shall pass a law respecting one business over another. So this is very similar to like the taxes and stuff like that. Basically, what this comes down to is I don't want the government regulating businesses just because they determine that business needs regulation based on its own traditional, basically kind of like its own traditional ideas. Okay. So you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it to where, okay, liquor stores. Let's pull up the bar example. The bar example is a good one. Okay, even though I know a lot of people aren't okay with bars, some people aren't okay with bars. Anyway, that's
not the point.
Not the point.
It's the business itself.
So you have a law regulating saying a bar or a gun store or X, Y, and Z cannot be within X school zone, right? So that seems like it's fine and dandy. You don't want those kind of places close to school zones, okay? The problem with that is when you open up that door, that means now I, as the government, can identify any area and adjust the zoning issues for those kind of areas. So now I can write a rule. Now I can write a rule or a law that says, well, I don't want vape stores close to liquor stores. I don't want them standing next to each other because I think the two of those standing next to each other will just cause them to feed off of each other. Okay, so that's where it lies. It's just another issue of the government getting too far involved and being able to make individual choices for those kind of places. If you're afraid that a bar is going to be too close to a school, really, really simple. Make sure none of your friends go to that bar. Don't take your friends there. Don't take your family members there. And if you really, as a community, believe it is an issue to have that bar close to that school zone, then don't patron the bar. Start a campaign. Yep. Go online. Start a petition.
Peaceful protests.
Peaceful protests. Something like that. Go, we don't want this bar outside of our place. And guess what? If you do that, people aren't going to go there. People aren't going to want to be involved in that. Let the free market do its job. Stop asking the government to come in and regulate the morality you think people should abide by. If your morality is that good, if your morality is that proven to be that solid, and it works in a factual, real-world environment, then by you showing that and explaining that to other people will convince them of that too. Free markets will decide things the best. Don't force the government to regulate your morality onto other people. Let the market decide what's best for the situation.
Because people forget it goes both ways. It really does. It's one of those things like, once you start doing it for one side, it'll happen for the other. You're just waiting. It's just a time thing.
Right.
Like sin tax, the reason behind it, because it was a sin. And it's like, okay.
You wanted to discourage people from doing it.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, yeah, but what if it comes around? And it's just such a dangerous road to walk. I can't see a reasonable argument for not letting, because if it is in that area not okay for you to go to a bar near a school, right? People think it's like, how would you put that?
I don't know. I think it's just it comes down to just people trying to legislate what they think's right in a given community.
Yeah,
and I don't think it's
the thing is,
it's not you should not be able to enforce your will upon me with law.
Yeah,
you should not have some government guy that you dictate morality that isn't my morality.
Yeah, it's just discrimination again. Yeah, it's discrimination again.
It just comes down to basic discrimination. Yeah. So simply just don't. Let's not discriminate. All right. No. Okay. Now I like this one. I like this one a lot. This one's pretty good. No government official shall benefit in any financial manner from legislation that does not benefit individual citizens in an equal manner. Okay, so people talk about all the dirty stuff that happens in politics as far as, people writing laws that favor one business over another, and then those people will invest money into those companies and then write laws that cause those companies to make a whole bunch of money, and then they profit off of them. That's one of the things they always talk about, politics and business. Business and politics, and as far as governments having too much influence and stuff like that. This is kind of like a workaround for kind of basically getting rid of lobbyists without directly banning lobbyists, because I don't think that's right. I think a business should be able to come before a voting body and plead their case as to why X, Y, and Z is going to be bad for them if you're trying to write a law or if you're trying to write a regulation on a particular industry. Okay, so you should still be able to go before the government and petition them like that. But my big issue is, if you have a financial stake in that company, you're going to make decisions based on your financial stake in that company and not necessarily what's going to be best for your constituents. Now, if you're in that industry and now you're not allowed to vote on that, you have to recuse yourself from that kind of thing. And remember, all of these are still kind of a work in progress. So if anybody wants to make the argument that, well, then now you're limiting people's rights to vote on something like that, right? So now because I'm a representative, I can't vote on that because I have a financial stake in that interest. Well, there's a couple of ways you can go with that. One, you could say that was unfair to the people, or that they didn't get to their representation didn't happen, so they didn't get to vote. Or you could look at it as, well, people maybe shouldn't be voting in people that are financially invested in things they're truly concerned about. So I'm like I said, this is all flexible. This is one of those things. These are ideas. These are something to talk about. These are something to think about. So I can understand that, and maybe we could even get to, maybe instead of maybe necessarily being able to vote, but maybe they're not able to go out and try to convince the rest of their colleagues on it. They're not able to do backdoor things. They're not able to go to the floor and profess their opinions on that particular topic. So maybe not necessarily remove their ability to vote on it, but maybe remove their ability to influence on it in a public in a public forum, which is really all you can ever try to stop them from doing anyway. But try to get it to where they're not allowed to be involved in that particular type of legislation. Yeah. So maybe if you've got in prime example, senators, right? You've got 2 senators for every state. Well, if your state is really big on, agriculture, well, make sure that at least one of your representatives isn't a farmer or doesn't currently own a farm. Do it kind of like that. So that way everybody still gets their vote, but your agriculture experience can come through in a different way. Or maybe instead of allowing the representative to make the argument for you, if the legislation is truly that important, then let them bring in witnesses to argue for them versus having them directly do it because of financial stake. You're never going to completely get rid of corruption in politics, but I'm thinking maybe this would at least be some kind of stepping stone towards limiting the ability of that corruption a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's pretty simple. At that point, it's self-explanatory. It's just, we don't want corrupt people profiting on what will end up hurting us because they had stakes in X company. It's simple enough.
Right.
Yep. What's the next one?
All right. Let's see here. And actually, really, that big one, too, the legislature elected official, I was really thinking about judges a lot with that one, too. I don't think a judge should be able to rule on a case that they financially have stake in, and I know sometimes that happens, even with the whole supposed to recuse yourself from a certain situation. So, that's why I recuse from voting or ruling on said matters. So, personal or financial. Okay, so on to our next one. All disagreements between government and business shall be settled in a courtroom by a jury of peers. So, one of the reasons why all disagreements between government and business shall be settled in a courtroom by a jury of your peers. So, one of my big issues with this one was I'm trying to make it harder for government to regulate an industry. One of our first ones was this is the reason why I thought this other one should be first, was no business shall be regulated without the government proving in a courtroom of their peers that they're a credible threat to public safety. So this one kind of ties in with that one. What this one does is basically, my goal with this one was to make it to where if the government tries creating a regulation that they believe will help do some good in an industry, make it safer, right? OSHA was one of the things I was thinking about for this. OSHA, a lot of people in the industry complain about OSHA and their over-regulation, and they get too crazy with things and all this other kind of stuff, right? So if the government, so this gives kind of an option. So if the government passes a regulation saying that it's the reason they're passing this regulation is because it's an imminent safety threat to the people working in that industry or to the larger public, the public at large, right? They use the kind of argument for drugs and all that other kind of to make drugs and marijuana and all this other stuff illegal, or to create SIM taxes and stuff like that. That's always their argument. These things are bad for people. They pose a public threat, so we must regulate or tax them to make to where people do less of them. Okay. The problem is a lot of that stuff is based on junk science, is based on opinions, is not based on fact. It's not based on any of that kind of stuff. It's just somebody's opinion that this shouldn't happen, and boom, and that's it. So what this gives an opportunity for is that way if the government passes a regulation that says you can't do this because it's harmful to the people. Well, now if I as a business owner disagree with that and think it's going to do more harm to my business as this regulation, and if you can't prove that regulation is a threat to public safety, then that regulation goes away. So that gives the businesses the ability to challenge government regulation in a court of law based strictly on a public safety threat. And if that public safety threat does not exist, that law should be considered null and void, because the government needs to be able to prove that the regulations they are putting in play benefit all of society and are not just targeting an individual business. So this gives business owners a recourse to fight back against government of overregulation. So,
yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to you?
Oh, it totally makes sense to me. At least I think so. I think that's one of those things where, and I put a jury of peers in there because obviously that's one of the big things. So, and then one of the other things is I put a little caveat in this one too as I was writing. It was like, so basically, if you can't prove it at the time, it still gives the government the option if new evidence comes out. This little caveat was basically like new discourses, new discussions or evidence. So you can basically go back in and then kind of go back and do it. So if there's a big issue with the law, if new evidence is discovered, the government can go back, based on that new evidence, go back to the court and try the case again. So, but one of those caveats that I would add to this was that there's got to be some, I don't know, there's got to be something more to do with that, make it to where it works, to where you don't have the government tying people up in court for decades. So there's got to be some kind of time limit. There's got to be something you've got to put on there to make sure that the government doesn't just tie it up in the court system for decades or, years in general, to make sure there's got to be some kind of limit put on that. I don't know how to quite limit that.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of those things that can be argued in regulation too. Just so that way, if there is new evidence coming out, like prime example, right? It used to be everybody said, the tobacco companies used to say, oh, look at all this evidence we have that proves cigarettes don't cause cancer, or they're not harmful, that they're good for you, right? Well, now, 50, 60 years later, we all know that's bullshit.
Crazy.
There's been enough evidence out there to prove that. So in that case, that would be one of those situations where the government can go, look, we've got this proof. And then the government can pass their regulation with that new proof, with that new evidence. And then it's on the company to challenge the government again, saying, no, that evidence is also bullshit. But I know there's going to have to be some regulations on that to kind of limit how often you can do it and stuff like that, to make sure that politicians aren't constantly tying businesses up in BS regulations and BS court battles just to hurt a particular individual, and vice versa. Make sure that the businesses aren't just screwing with the courts. There's going to be some kind of funny happy medium that you've got to be able to find when all that regulates out.
Yeah.
So. All right, and then the last one that I believe should be the first one. And then new that's what it is. New discoveries or evidence. Actions to be taken by. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then the last one, which I believe should be number 1, just because it kind of gives like a preamble to all of this, is no business shall be regulated by the government without proving in a courtroom a jury of their peers to be a credible threat to public safety. So that one's kind of the caveat that leads into the rest of these. That's the very first one. So you can't regulate a business flat out. I should be able to open up any business I want, no matter what it is, and you cannot get involved unless you can prove to me my business actions and my industry is a credible threat to public safety. One of the things that really brought this up with me was vaping. You have no evidence whatsoever that vaping is dangerous in any way, shape, or form, any more than breathing traditional air, as far as any of the science can prove as of right now. We've been vaping for years, okay? And we know this stuff doesn't hurt us, but you had one piece of BS news that the CDC ended up proving wasn't true at all. The CDC proved that the initial ideas of what was causing the damage wasn't true at all. Well, it doesn't matter. That was enough information for the politicians to run on and kill an entire industry in many states just because they wanted to get rid of it. Now, there's a lot of speculation.
By doing so, they killed a lot of people. They're killing a lot of people.
Exactly. So, because the government wasn't able to prove that vaping was a credible threat to public safety, because they didn't have to prove that vaping was a credible threat to public safety, there's a lot of other people that are going to keep on smoking and keep on cigarettes, which we know kill people, and now you're not going to be able to do any of that.
Yeah.
Now you're never going to be able to get people off cigarettes, and they're going to stay on cigarettes, and they're going to die.
Marijuana is another example that we don't see very many downsides to it nowadays. It's mostly, I hate to say it, but it's mostly upsides. I don't hate to say it, actually. There's a bunch of industries just like it, that have just been attacked for no reason, except for political interest.
Yeah.
So it's.
I mean, yeah, and and I'm glad you brought up marijuana, because marijuana is a great example of all of this. You have a drug, you have a plant that grows naturally in the earth, comes out of the ground, no big deal. God, nature, whatever you want to look at it, put it there. Okay. Because of all the stigma, because of all the BS back in the 60s and 70s, we can go into the long history. Anybody that wants to look it up can look up the history of marijuana and why the regulations and all that kind of stuff came into play. The problem was that's not really the point of this. The point is that the government, without having to vet the industry, we're just going to say the marijuana industry, because the government did not have to vet the marijuana industry in a way to prove that they were a credible threat to society as a whole, you now have put all of these people into jail, and all of these people, you've wasted all of these billions of dollars and trillions of dollars probably at this point on something that you can't scientifically prove to me is a credible threat to society at large. But now you've jailed all these people, you've wasted all of these billions of tax dollars.
Well, we've caused an irreversible, a generation of people who've gone to prison. That's irreversible. The damage that happens in prison is not, you are genuinely isolated. It is not a fun place to be. From anything I've heard,
nope.
The government, without any provocation, sent all those people.
Yep.
They had no real reason to.
Right.
Because they were, slinging some weed?
Yeah.
Cool. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's never hurt anyone.
Yeah. They tried to claim the drug war was enough of a significant issue within society that it was bad, that all of these things were so bad that we just had to spend millions of billions of dollars, regulating it and throwing people in jail and all of this stuff over a failed policy because the government regulated something they didn't know anything about. And the same things happen in the vaping industry, and I'm sure the same things happen through a lot of different industries over the years. Without any knowledge of any real kind whatsoever, you have these politicians and you have all of the rest of these government representatives making rules and regulations for industries and for subjects they don't understand for no reason other than to prevent the rest of us from getting access to it and to keep their power and control.
Sad stuff, man.
It is.
It's genuinely sad stuff. Yeah. Any more?
No, that's all 10 of them.
Cool.